I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about the AmFest Spicy Day 1. Ben Shapiro went out after Erica Kirk, and he laid out some important things and called out people, named names, gave examples on what people were doing wrong within the conservative movement and what viewers are owed. And I, support his overall sentiment. Just FYI, people coming in who might be curious. And I thought a lot of things that he said needed to be said. He got a lot of applause. Tucker Carlson came in, it was Russell Brand and I think it was Michael Knowles. And then Tucker came in and had some words about Ben, and mischaracterized his speech, but and the criticisms toward him, and said things that I thought were unbiblical. And but he said the civil war within the right was fake, and I don't think that's true. And I also believe that he's the one who pretty much started it, especially like when it comes to his beef with Ben, because he started off with like character assassination and stuff too. And I can show you an example of how how Tucker mischaracterizes his criticisms of people who attack him. So I want to talk about that. Then that's going to be a pretty beefy topic. There's some interesting things going on in the news other than that. Out of some more election stuff from Georgia dropped last night. They did catch the carcass of the Brown shooter. They did not catch him alive. He took his own life. And apparently a Reddit person helped crack the case, which is interesting. There was a lot of failures in real time from law enforcement, but I'm glad that they did catch him eventually, so interesting things going on. But this Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson war on the right is very interesting, and it's also very important. It's not really just gossip. It is about how we're moving forward as a movement, and what is going to be our effect. And if in the end, when and if we can be victorious, will we actually achieve victory? Because will we be advancing the values we're supposed to be advancing, or are we just going to be like the left with kind of a different mask on? So before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktunes.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website, because it does cost to stream and run my site, all that good stuff, so you guys can support. I very much appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merchandise that's available at the store, like different t-shirts and mugs and so on, so you guys can support. I very much do appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different books. I have 19 altogether. Personally, I like to write, so I have nonfiction and fiction books, mostly fiction books, and some of them are children's picture books like Bigger. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check that out and get that for your little ones. But it's about a baby dinosaur who wants to grow bigger. And I have chapter books like Super Kid, a lot of great values in Super Kid, and then it just goes on with a lot of different genres and stuff, upper in age beyond that. So I encourage you guys to check it out. I love to write. And I suppose that's it. Next week is Christmas. Everybody's pretty much taken a break. I think I will I'm busy on I probably will take the week, maybe, because it will because I got some stuff to do on Monday and then we're getting kind of close to the days. So I do plan to still like post content, so make sure that you have your eyes out, but and alerts on for what good that does. But right now I don't know if I'll be live next week at all, but I may do an impromptu thing. I may change my mind. Sometimes when the news is like, you know, I guess when the tea is piping hot, sometimes I gotta do something. Oh, someone got, oh yay! Priscilla got the bigger book. Can't wait to read it for Christmas. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. Hope she likes it. Hope she likes it. It was again it's inspired by my nephew, because he would say bigger and bigger and bigger when he was little. Now he's 10 and he says bro and he has a PS5, and just life is so different since the time then I started writing it. And my youngest sister Tina was the one who did the illustrations for it. She like kept building her craft and she got really good at like watercolors and stuff. And you know, she put the art together, and unfortunately like my mom passed away while she was in the midst of doing that. So there's a section at the end that's like dedicated to my mom too, but it's also a story about a child and their love of their mom. So it's a big emotional project for me and for her, for the family. And I'm really blessed that people are enjoying it, and I can't wait till I put out some more picture books as well. I'm currently working on one of my novels though. That's what I'm doing in my spare time. When I find spare time, there's never a spare time when you're self-employed, I suppose. Because you're doing everything yourself with the books and black tea and other stuff. So it's just a lot. But thank you guys, and I thank you for your support, and I'm glad that you picked it up, and I'm grateful to anyone else who has. And it's a really good book. Anyway, let's chit chat about AmFest. So Erica got up there. She made a joke about Egyptian planes. She, said something that was pretty bold. That her goal, or Charlie's goal, was to elect his friend JD Vance in 2028. And I don't know, I have some feelings about JD that are kind of complicated, but I think it's really too early to devote an organization like that to someone in the future for something that's that many years away. And I used to work for the Michigan Republican Party, and we weren't really supposed to. It was the people we're supposed to pick. We're supposed to just like help elect folks. Now there were people on the inside who had favorites or whatever, and they didn't always get their way. But I don't know. I just this is their organization. They can do what they want, but I just feel like that's kind of early to pick sides like that. But I don't know. It's not like Charlie wasn't obvious when he wanted like Trump to be reelected, and thought like he had a lot of respect for DeSantis, but he like criticized him in ways I'm like, that's not like, well, he was biased. So I'm not I guess terribly surprised, but yeah, I thought that was pretty bold to come out and just say that. But anyway, she spoke, and then Ben spoke, and Ben just like had a flamethrower. And he named names. He called out Candace Owens, obviously. He called out Megyn Kelly, and he called out Tucker Carlson. He also called out Steve Bannon. He brought up the fact that he did some work with Epstein. And the crowd was like, ooh, and he's like, check the record, and the crowd went like wild for a lot of things that he was saying, especially when he was criticizing Candace. And when he criticized Megyn Kelly, he criticized her for not having the moral courage to say something, and then having the excuse of like, Candace Owens is a mother, a young mother. And he's like, so is Meghan Markle, so is Ilhan Omar. Like, what does that even mean? And he said a great line about how politics isn't the sisterhood of traveling pants. So Megyn was upset about that. Candace Owens reaction to his speech was, oh, I know Israel must be involved in Charlie Kirk's murder because Ben Shapiro is so invested in Charlie Kirk's murder. So that didn't make any sense. She had an interesting appearance on Piers Morgan's show. So I don't know anyone who's still taking her seriously. I don't know. I guess what's wrong with everybody, but you guys do you. But as far as his criticism for Tucker, those were the most interesting to me, which shouldn't have been surprising because Ben went to the Heritage Foundation and devoted his entire speech to how Tucker Carlson is not a conservative. That was the entirety of the speech. And he talked about not from just a foreign policy standpoint, but how he violated free markets and other sorts of aspects of conservatism, and laid out his different quotes and made the case. And so there's people who have interesting pushback to the whole Ben Tucker thing. One thing that I'm seeing people say that I find kind of disturbing is people will dismiss criticisms of Ben Shapiro by saying, well, Ben doesn't believe Jesus is the Messiah, so there. And I'm like, or did you see what he said about Jesus on Joe Rogan some years ago? And I'm like, yeah, I saw it. I didn't like it. You know, definitely made me sad. It made my heart hurt. But it's no surprise that he was a Jewish man. But so just because he's, I believe, wrong on that, or I'll say no, he's wrong on that, and I pray for his heart to change in that direction and his eyes to be open. But does that mean that any person can come in quoting different scriptures or claiming that they read the Bible and automatically get your support over a Jew? What about the substance of his actual arguments and his actual criticisms of Tucker? And I don't find Tucker's responses when he brings up the Bible to be very biblical, like not as a whole. And Tucker will self-deprecate himself a lot. He's like, well, I'm not a perfect Christian, or I'm just, learning, and I'm not a biblical scholar, but these pastors are, and he'll just go on and say that that he hates, Christian Zionists more than any other group, or that pastors who support Israel are the villains of the story. And I'm like, not even Hamas, it's just the pastors. And then he'll base his hatred of them and criticisms of them on smears. So, and say that Israel's purposely killing these people. I'm like, where's your evidence for that? He doesn't have any. And so he'll use that to smear everybody else around. And I just, a lot of people like to be pandered to. A lot of people like virtue signaling, and they respond to it. It's not just the left who responds to virtue signaling. So there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who know that they can say, I am a Christian. People have done it in politics forever. Elected officials and so on, or people who hope to be elected officials who don't actually lead that much of a Christian life, but they will say that they are a Christian, and they'll quote a few scriptures, and people are like, well, I want to vote for that person because they say that they're a Christian, even though they may have not great policies, or they may not really live it out loud or whatever. And they'll take their side over, someone who may have more in common with them as far as their ideals, but they are not quite there on the belief train. So Mike Winger, for example, said that Ben was right. And someone was like, did you see what he said about Jesus? And I'm like, and she said Jesus and Christians. And I'm like, Ben has said that Christians are like vital to saving the West and saving America. He uplifts Christians and Christianity and says people need to go to church. Like, he very much uplifts that. He had people like Vadi Bachman on his show. John Piper, was it Piper or was it MacArthur? It was MacArthur on a show, who's both those people have passed away. and really allowed them to have the time to explain Christianity and the resurrection and things like that. And Ben knows, even though he disagrees, and I don't know how deep his disagreement and stuff is. I guess it would be interesting to actually hear a theological rebuttal to why he doesn't believe Jesus is Messiah. I just know that he doesn't. Because he's had some conversations with some pretty, big some big dogs, as far as people who can defend the faith. But he knows that those people genuinely want him to be saved. That they have the best intentions in mind for him, as opposed to some people who just shout Christ is king to berate him. There's a different intention there. So the people who do have good intentions in mind, and he knows that they have good values, because a lot of the values we actually share, because it stems from the Old Testament, and Jesus is the fulfillment of that. He's the completion of that. He wants that to be upheld in the United States of America, in the West in general, and it would be good for the whole entire world. So people who just want to dismiss him, because comments that I certainly didn't like, and I said it hurt my heart. I was like, oh no, Ben. When he said that on Rogan a couple of years ago, I would hope he would not even if he shares some of the beliefs, I would hope he wouldn't even like phrase it or put it that way, or kind of, since then, I mean, he's always talked about good values in Christianity or whatever, but I don't know. I think as far as an appreciation for Christianity and a need for Christianity, I think I've seen more of that since that time, especially because Jewish people don't proselytize. They don't proselytize. There's only like 15 million of them in the world. And they can't do it alone. They can't promote Judeo-Christian values or even Judeo values all on their own. They're screwed. Okay. There's very few of them. And again, they don't proselytize, So anyway, people who are just trying to dismiss Ben and not actually listen to his critiques, I don't appreciate it, not in the least bit. So I want to show some demonstrations of what he was saying versus like his Tucker's response to what he was saying. And so if I could summarize Ben's speech, and then I'll summarize, I guess, Tucker's speech, and then play an example to show how Tucker was just dishonest with Ben's response to him. The best example is probably the USS Liberty interactions and stuff. So I'll probably go show that. If you have time, I do recommend going and watching the whole thing for yourself. It is spicy. And then you can go ahead and watch Tucker. And I think there's a reason why Tucker's been dodging Ben's debates, because he wouldn't look great. But even seeing Ben criticize him, and then the same crowd gets to see Tucker respond to him, it doesn't go over extremely well for Tucker. And Tucker said some other things that were like a bit mind-boggling to people, like his condemning Americans for talking about Muslims and stuff and so on. So anyway, Ben came in hot, saying that we are owed the truth and we have an obligation to tell the truth. And there are certain people who aren't doing that. And we have a moral obligation to not lie to our audiences as podcasters and so on, and to not and to be clear with our language. So people who refer to people as they all the time, like Candace Owens, and will say they are doing this, or when Kanye or whatever saying they are doing this, and they mean the Jews or whatever, which Ben didn't mention Israel, whatever, but we kind of know what they're insinuating, different stuff. Or Candace would say they be about Turning Point USA, and being involved with Charlie's murder or whatever, but they use this vague language to hide behind what they really mean. And he's like, we should be concise and clear with our language and not breed into different conspiratorial stuff. And he's like, conspiracies can be true, but there needs to be evidence, actual evidence for conspiracies. And so we need to be specific about the things that we say. So he did call out Candace Owens by name. He also said when people do evil things, like, we have a moral obligation to say something. And with politics, it's not the sisterhood of the traveling pants. So he called out Megyn Kelly for not having the moral courage to say something when Candace was attacking all these people and accusing them of being involved with Charlie's murder. That was, I don't understand Megyn's role in all this. Because at first she was like, when she talked to Ben, she's like, I don't follow this stuff. I don't really know Candace. She would tell people, I don't really know Candace, but she's a mother and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I know that her and Candace have gotten on a back and forth online. And Candace and Erica, of course, had their meeting. And then Megyn Kelly said that she was the one who arranged them getting together or was working behind the scenes to make it happen. And I don't think that they really should have done that, or Erica should have had to have done that. And Megan's like, I want to see Megyn. I'm trying to see Candace's side of things. And Ben's like, why would, she's the widow. She lost her husband. Like, the only side to take is Erica's. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So Megyn was pretty mad that Ben called her out. And she's like, people don't even know what's going on. And well, she did tell everyone that she didn't really follow the stuff and that she was unaware of it. And now she's like, I was working behind the scenes. And it just seems shady. And she's like, I'm not the mother of the internet. That's why I can't say anything. Oh, but you wanted everybody to just get together. And she also tried to, like, when she was talking to Ben and Ben kept talking about Tucker Carlson and she was defending Tucker the whole time, like, I don't need to defend Tucker. He can defend himself. And she was defending him very vigorously, like, through her conversation with Ben. And she's like, well, can you guys reconcile? Can you guys reconcile? Can't you guys reconcile? And Ben's like, it's not personal. Like, you're doing this thing where you're trying to make it seem like it's a personal thing. And that's why I'm saying this stuff. It's not personal. And he attacked me. And I was trying to do a debate, have a conversation on air, behind the scenes. Tucker's been avoiding me for like 2 years. So this is not personal. I don't think we are on the same side. I don't think we align ideologically anymore. It's not personal. And she's like, well, can't you just, her interview with Ben was so annoying. And I did a reaction to that if you guys didn't see it before, but anyway, he called out Megyn Kelly. And he said, when you interview someone, you could have them on, but you have a responsibility to ask them questions and not just have these guests on so you can just nod and be like, oh, that's people assume that's what you agree with when you don't push back on anything that they're saying. And when you platform people like Nick Fuentes, and he was very frank with different quotes and things that he has said about JD Vance's wife, about Turning Point, about how he took the organization and he bleeped them, and that's why there's so many groypers, and he bleeped Charlie Kirk's baby. And so Ben, he dropped the F word to quote Nick, and he just blatantly said it. So it's like, you platform these people and you give them a really softball interview. That's not right. And so Ben was right about those things. And he also talked about the dangers of conspiracy and feeling like, not that there's not conspiracies and other stuff going on, but when you feel like everything is so against you, just like the left preaches, every systemic racism, all this stuff, etc., it begins to destroy your own agency. So you need to take accountability, get up, go seize the day, clean your room, all that stuff. That's very important to make sure that we have a sense of agency and we don't end up just like the left. So he didn't only throw bombs at people and flamethrowers. He talked about obligations and he talked about solutions. And so I thought Ben had a great speech. And if you haven't watched it, you should watch it. There was a Q&A. Only some of them were like, oh, how do you advance conservatism on college campuses, stand up for what you believe in, etc. There was one interesting exchange that he had with someone who pushed the USS Liberty story, which Israel had during the 12-day war. There was a friendly fire situation where Israel ended up attacking a U.S. ship. So this happened a long time ago, obviously, but people, still bring it up. And when people bring it up, it's usually to play Israel's like the bad guys. Like, we can't actually trust them. They attacked USS Liberty all these years ago. And so Ben pushed back on, well, he defended that it was an accident and that Israel paid reparations. And he asked the questioner, like, okay, what is your motivation for asking this question? Now, some people were like, well, that we're just asking questions. We're just asking questions. It been talked about how it's good to ask questions if you're actually seeking the truth. But if you're just asking questions with some kind of agenda and you're just not being honest or you're letting it hang to kind of build conspiracies, that's not a good thing. So he asked them a couple times, like, what is your motivation? And he wouldn't really say. It was a very NPC moment. And Tucker eventually threw out something like, oh, you call a kid a Hitlerite. He didn't do that. And he brought up another criticism later of Ben mischaracterizing that interaction, and that's not how it was. Now Charlie, and I can play a clip of Charlie too dealing with those kinds of questions. He would just straight up condemn them and say, don't spread conspiracies like in my conferences. Like, we're not doing that here. So Charlie would just shut the stuff down. He didn't engage with that stuff like Ben engaged with that question. Charlie was like, I'm not having it. He didn't want Nick Fuentes anywhere near his organization. And there's other people, I guess, Turning Point don't want near their organization because they wouldn't let the fresh and fit guys in there. Security, they were in like the building and they had security like usher them off somewhere. They wouldn't let them in. So there's certain people. I think what the one time would they not let like Lady Gaga or somebody? There's somebody they wouldn't let in, but sometimes they don't let certain people in. Now I don't. There's more people who I don't think they should let on stage, but that was Charlie's decision, and I don't agree with everything Charlie and Kirk said and did. But Tucker mischaracterizes Ben's whole speech. So anyway, Tucker comes on stage. He starts laughing about the speech, and he's talking about deplatforming at a Charlie Kirk's event. Again, Charlie Kirk, there were some people he did not want to platform. He did not want to entertain. He didn't even want to say their names. Okay. So the idea that Charlie was just like free for all, anyone can come and say anything, that wasn't how he operated. He did gatekeep a bit. Okay. I think he should probably do more gatekeeping, but he did gatekeep a bit. And he really didn't want groypers to get a hold of Turning Point USA. And Tucker, he talked about how people will say things like, oh, you're a racist, and throw out these accusations to dismiss speech. And he's like, oh, that's what the left did. And, and now people on the right are trying to do it too. Now, the issue with that is that Tucker there are people who are like, shut up, you're racist, shut up, you're anti-Semitic or whatever. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I mean, people do ad hominem attacks all the time. They'll do it in my comments. What do you think 7K is? There's no evidence of that. but people throw that in there to dismiss what you're saying. So people do that to ride you off all the time. And when people, will say something, attack you, whatever, I'll just be like, okay, well, this is ad hominem, or maybe with the 7K, I'll say, did Qatar pay you to write that or something like that? But people do it. So I'm not dismissing that people dismiss people, call them racist or whatever. But that's certainly not what Ben did. And there's quite a few people who have criticized Tucker who are trying to, who have, maybe they call them anti-Semitic, maybe they've called them racist, but that doesn't mean that they don't have some kind of good faith criticism about some of the things that he's saying and doing. And I don't think Tucker Carlson is anti-Semitic, but I think some of it, I don't like some of his actions. And as a matter of fact, Ben Shapiro was asked, does he think Candace Owens is an anti-Semite? And he said, I don't think those terms are helpful. But he's like, we can look at their actions and what they're doing. So we don't have to use those terms. We can talk about what you're doing. And Tucker went on and had a conversation about why he's actually not anti-Semitic. And he said he's not anti-Semitic because we're all made in the image of God. And, you know, the Bible doesn't instruct us to hate anyone because of our ethnicity and our background and et cetera, et cetera. And so I can't be anti-Semitic because that's not what the Bible teaches. And then he starts ranting about how people who, you know, will be mad about anti-Semitism, but where were they basically with white people who've been discriminated against? And I have to go back and listen to him, but I'm pretty sure he said something about like it's been more than like the anti-Semitism, and I'm like, no, at least maybe if you're talking about like on a widespread, I mean, there's just more white people, and it's kind of been acceptable to do that, but the repercussions of like anti-Semitism has been Bondi Beach, for example, or throwing Molotov cocktails on protesters and yelling "Globalize the Intifada" and October. So there's just, you know, it's not the same, but he was saying like ADL, like, how come you weren't calling out racism toward white people, but you're all up in the stuff about people saying stuff about Jews? I feel like that is a fair criticism to people out there. Like, why didn't you care about other sorts of racism and other things out there? And he did say like, well, you can come and join the right side now, like, and people can always, you know, try to absolve themselves of mistakes that they've made in the past after they've learned to do better, be better. But then he ended up saying other things in his speech about racism, like, don't call me racist. You can't do that because people have souls. And let me just play that clip for you guys. Now, at that point in time, he started talking about how people didn't want him to come to AmFest, and how people were trying to shut down that speech, and how Charlie was under immense pressure, which was true. That's absolutely true. There was a donor right before he died who pulled $2 million because he was having Tucker. And that's totally up to the donors to do that. And I wouldn't want my money platforming Tucker either, just with some of the stuff he's been saying. So I'm sympathetic to the donor. And I can understand Charlie being frustrated that they were going to lose $2 million, but is what it is, you know? So he started talking about how people didn't want him to come to AmFest. And then he also brings up this point about people should be able to say what they want. And so I had posted a video about this last night, and some people were like, no, he was talking about censorship and government censorship and stuff. And I'm like, he wasn't, though. He was talking about people, like, in general, who want to silence people, because he's criticizing Ben, and he was criticizing people who didn't want him to speak at AmFest. Like, that was the context. I mean, you could do a long speech about government censorship and the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop, and the hiding information about COVID data because they were scared about how people would weaponize and use the COVID data. There's all kinds of things we could talk about. The suppression of speech on Facebook, on YouTube. I mentioned how There's stories that have come out about how the jab may have led to children dying. That was a memo, censors listening, that came out from the Trump administration. And there's some doctors who are like, we need to see evidence of that. We need to, because they don't want to accept it or whatever. And I'm like, last year around Thanksgiving, I got a hard strike for mentioning a story about a father who was sobbing and crying and gave a testimony about how his young son took the you know what and then is no longer with us. And so me mentioning that story got me a hard strike. I couldn't post for, I think it was a full week, but they maybe gave me back access. I can't remember if they did, but they made me take like a little test about misinformation and so on. It was so ridiculous. I'm like, oh, so now we could just talk about this now, huh? So we could talk about social media companies using the government pressuring platforms and stuff to do whatever, and we can talk about censorship, but that's not what was going on with Tucker when he said this stuff. So anyway, here's this particular clip.
Erica, who I just saw backstage and whom I love and who I can tell you is totally committed to continuing the core principle of Charlie's public life, which is the right of every person to express what he believes. That is rooted in Christian faith. We believe people should be able to say what they think because they have souls. They're human beings created by God. They are not slaves. They are not animals. They are not objects. You cannot tell another human being to shut up, even shut up racist, because you don't own him. He is an independent, autonomous person created by God as an individual. Okay, so that's where that belief comes from. That's where free speech comes from. And there's no accident. This is the only country in the world that protects it, because our founding documents were informed, as you just heard so nicely expressed by Michael Knowles, my friend, by people who self-consciously incorporated Christian precepts into their structure of government.
So, Tucker, saying that, I had heard that. I was like, what? This is so stupid. And then I played for my sister. I was like, listen to this. And she just got like more confused as it went on. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to play that for some people. And she's like, why would you say this? You can't even say shut up, racist. So you can tell people to shut up, certainly, and you can condemn people, you can criticize them, and guess what? That's your free speech too. And if you're like, I don't like what Tucker's saying, I'm not going to invite him to AmFest next year or something like that, I'm not going to have him on my platform. Guess what? That's exercising your First Amendment right to also freely associate with who you want to associate with. You have a free speech right to tell someone to shut up. So there's that aspect of it. It's not great for debate when people just say shut up, and because obviously at that point they don't really want to debate with you. I guess if they're just telling you to shut up and they're closing their ears and they don't want to engage any further. And if that's what they want, then that's what they want. Some people you can't reason with, and some people don't think you're worth having the conversation with. There's certain points I'll go back and forth with people, and I'm like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. They're not tracking the conversation. They're not good faith. They're just totally gone or whatever. And I'm like, okay, fine. I might block them. I don't block a lot though, but so someone was like going back and forth with me, really, really dumb comments on abortion. They gave me the really stupid hypothetical. I responded to the hypothetical, and then they couldn't track the response. I couldn't believe how kind of dumb they were. And then they're like, so I just was like, you know what? You couldn't track it. And I posted some articles that I wrote. And like, you could just keep posting article links all you want, but blah, blah, blah. And if you really want to debate, you can DM me. And I'm like, I posted my articles because they're my content. Like, I wrote out articles so I wouldn't have to argue the same thing over and over and over and over again with every single person I come across about this topic. So if you don't want to read what I wrote about the specific thing that we're arguing about, then I you're not entitled to any more of my time if you clearly don't want to hear my thoughts about it. But I'm like, you haven't demonstrated that it would be worth my time to continue talking about you, that you're a good faith actor, that you're competent enough to continue this conversation. I'm like, I'm done. And I've seen people like still respond to him in the comments. I didn't block him, like he's still there, but I'm like, I'm not gonna continue this. Like and it's just one of me. There's obviously a lot of people who comment on my stuff. Like I just everybody can't be entitled to my time like that. And I still have like life outside of obviously being online. So so sometimes you can't keep continuing having a conversation. You have to, and you have the ability to say like we're done here. But as far as God gave us souls so we can express ourselves, and firstly I want to say him saying like we're made in God's image and stuff, that's from Genesis. And I very much remember Tucker saying that our biblical principles aren't based in the Old Testament, they're based in the New Testament, which he did that so he could exclude, I would say, the Judeo part of Judeo-Christian values, so he could later turn around and attack Jews, because his whole speech or whatever, it wasn't a speech, but he was talking to Megyn Kelly about Christianity, how it's so unique, and we don't believe in collective punishment because you're not guilty of the crimes of your father, which is actually something from the Old Testament, by the way. So he could turn around and say that the reason why Israel doesn't care about killing, people in Gaza is because they believe in collective punishment and they're the chosen people or whatever. So that's why he tried to make the argument that our values aren't based in the Old Testament, which is ridiculous. Liberty Bell has, Old Testament scripture on it. The Ten Commandments are from the Old Testament. Again, the idea that you don't punish children for the crimes of the father, that's Old Testament, as well as you see a lot of things reflected in the New Testament. They're in the Old Testament. The idea of loving your neighbor, that you can see that reflected in the Old Testament. God didn't just there wasn't a God that clocked out and we got a new one when the New Testament came. Like that's not how it worked. So I don't appreciate how Tucker will use the Bible to inaccurately to dunk on his different political opponents, which are apparently the Jews and people who support them. But the idea that God gives us a soul, therefore you can't tell people to shut up because they're independent, beings and stuff. The Bible teaches us that we're supposed to control our tongues, and conservatives should be telling people what they ought to do, how they ought to behave, that they should be aiming for a higher standard. You should be aiming for a higher standard. There's so many scriptures about controlling your mouth and wanting the Lord to help you control your mouth, whether it's something in Proverbs or you're looking at Ephesians, right? That you don't want to speak unwholesome things that are not edifying. The idea that you have a soul, no one can tell you to shut up. Like, no, sometimes you should be rebuking people. Sometimes you have to say, "Get behind me, Satan." Sometimes you have to correct somebody and you need to tell them to take a beat. You think Paul didn't tell people like they need to hush up? Sometimes it's just ridiculous. So I didn't like this rant. I thought it was kind of dumb from Tucker. I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of embarrassing. There are other embarrassing moments I thought from Tucker. And he ended his speech bringing up Christians and rebuking pastors who support I guess Israel, and them defending themselves or doing warfare in Gaza. And he had a reason, which is valid, that Well, the reasoning is valid, but his characterization isn't valid. That you don't want to harm innocents. You don't want to harm innocents, and of course you don't. But Tucker has not provided evidence that they are purposely harming innocents. Like, that is their intention when they conduct some kind of operation that does result in civilian casualties. It is a sad, especially consequence, especially of urban warfare, when your enemy uses civilian shields, when they build terror tunnels under hospitals and they turn schools into war zones or weapon caches. Like, Tucker's not stupid. So what is this? And it makes me quite, I don't know, his morality on this issue and Dave Smith and other people is so childish to me. Like, you understand, like, he keeps calling it murder and murder. Murder is an unjustified killing. And if you were purposely trying to kill and maximize civilian damage, then yeah, that would be gross. That would be immoral. But there is such a thing as just warfare. And it's very easy to say that Israel had a right to defend itself. But how do you suggest that they defend themselves and stop the enemy that is promising to continue killing them if they survive, or to get their hostages back? Like, if you want to talk about America first, they killed Americans and then they took American hostages, which we didn't get our last one back till May. So what exactly was Israel supposed to do? How were they supposed to conduct their warfare? What is the answer here? Because there's unfortunately not a scenario that exists that where you will never have any civilian casualties. It just doesn't exist. Can you drop leaflets and make calls and do roof knocks and all sorts of things to minimize civilian casualties? Yes, and they did. Did they make mistakes sometimes? They did, which Tucker will lie and say that they don't apologize for them, because he's trying to smear them, and then he feels righteous in smearing evangelical Christians. Now, I'm not telling you this because I believe that you ought to go ahead and just support Israel because the Bible says, like, that's not what I'm doing here. But it's good to be truthful about things that are going on and not mischaracterize them, and then treat evangelicals like the villains of the story. What is motivation for telling Theo Von that the people he truly sees and hates are Christians? What is his motivation in telling Nick Fuentes that the group he hates the most are Christian Zionists? Could it? Well, I guess this is me speculating here, but or just throwing out a fact that Christian evangelicals are pretty firm right-wing voting bloc. It just kind of seems strange that they're being attacked here. Especially by someone who then goes on to criticize them, Americans, for attacking Muslims. Now, that he didn't say in his speech, that was in response to a question, and it's very weird how he even gets there. In his rant, to just go ahead and include, hey, by the way, don't attack Muslims, and it's wrong to do that. Let me pull that up real quick, and then I want to show you guys the USS Liberty thing. Someone said, thank you for your clarity and truth in this situation. You are welcome. Like, I've said this many times, not that to me that foreign policy is ultra interesting or anything like that, but it's just, it seems very clear to me, more on a moral level, Hamas are bad guys who need to be destroyed. I've said this many times, and maybe I'll have to just make kind of a concise video about all the stuff, my feelings, but I've been overseas in dangerous places where there were Muslim terrorists, And the idea that someone could just kidnap you and people being like, like, let's tear down those photos of people who've been kidnapped, or people are saying like, oh no, it's too much, like how are they supposed to get them back? Because of course Hamas could have given them back and surrendered. And that's what they should have done as far as having a moral obligation to the people they govern. That's what they should have done. But all the responsibility is on Israel, as opposed to looking at the responsibility of the people in Gaza and of Hamas to do the right thing. But they have an obligation. Dave Smith's like, well, they shouldn't have did warfare. They could have did like police sort of tactics and just, smoked him out, or, done like little teeny kind of strikes here or there or something, even if it took longer, or even if it put more troops in danger. I'm like, do they not have an obligation to the parents who they said, hey, your children are going to go to war, and we need to win this, but we're going to do our darndest to make sure that they get home to you so they can live out the rest of their lives. Someone like Dave Smith is like, no, they should put themselves in even more greater danger. How is that ethical? How is that moral? To just go put your troops in a meat grinder without success. To have an ethical war, you have to have like a means of actually winning it. Like when you talk about just warfare, you have to have a just cause. You have to absolutely try not to kill civilians. That's a part of it. But you need to have clear goals, and you need to be able to achieve them in some kind of way, and the authority to do it. I doubt Tucker Carlson doesn't know anything about just warfare. He must know a little bit. But those are like rooted in Christian principles. And not just Old Testament stuff you look at, but also people will talk about Romans 13 and how authority is given to the government. They have an obligation to protect their people and to protect the innocent, and to defeat evil. Governments don't always do the right thing. They don't always act as they ought to, but they do have a responsibility to their people and to seek justice. So to me, a lot of these criticisms that I see about Israel and how different stuff is conducted, like, I understand there's all these videos that people push out, and it's very sad. But at the same time, how should they win? What should they have done? And a lot of people don't have good answers. So was the proper thing to do just give up and to let Hamas know that you can kidnap all these people and win because you built terror tunnels and you're hiding behind women and children? That just gives them an excuse to do it again next time and to encourage other groups to do something similar. Imagine if you lived in a border town in the United States of America and 5,000 people just came over all of a sudden and started killing and kidnapping people. How do you think the U.S. would react? How do you think the U.S. would react? I mean, if it was Texas or something that, people that have a lot of guns to fight back would happen at all. But there would still be casualties, especially if people just did it all of a sudden. 5,000 people come over, kidnap women, children, babies, men, rape people along the way. How do you think the U.S. would react? How do you think the U.S. would react? Like, not honestly, I think Israel did, to be frank. Especially if the damage was on the equivalent of what happened in Israel. which I think would be like 40,000 people or something like that. So I just see this issue as pretty morally clear. And it was just concerning the way I was seeing some people talk about this particular issue. And I find it concerning the way that Tucker talks about the particular issue, especially because at the end of the day, he seems more keen on attacking Christian evangelicals. So I wonder why that is. And Tucker will tell you that there isn't a civil war going on. I think there is, and he fired first. He definitely fired first. Let me play this clip about the Muslims. This Muslim clip real quick. And then I'll he said something about AIPAC, which is dumb. Here we go. I can play I guess there's no really point in playing the AIPAC thing. Someone asked him a question about AIPAC, and they're like, is it, America first to accept money from AIPAC? It's like, is it America first to accept money from a foreign government and that's going to convince people to give their taxpayers to that foreign government? Like, that's how he phrased it. He ought to know that AIPAC is not the government of Israel. The reason why they don't have to register with FARA is because it's not a foreign agent. It's Americans, who are interested in American-Israeli relations. But it is Americans who run the organization. It is not unique. There are other lobbying groups that are like AIPAC that do lobby in the interest of groups in the Middle East or other countries or whatever that are being ran by Americans. You cannot like that, but the focus on AIPAC is questionable. Why the focus on AIPAC? I'm sure Tucker knows why AIPAC doesn't have to register under FARA. I'm sure he knows that. But here's a snippet of him condemning people for being mean to Muslims.
Most people agree with that. Most Americans have more in common with each other than they disagree on. And almost everybody agrees on that. And almost everybody is willing to tolerate a good faith argument about how to get there. Except a few. And they're the ones running around calling everyone an anti-Semite. But everyone else is like, yeah, of course, that should be the debate. And they'll vote for you. They want that because they know they haven't had that. That's the fact. And what you're watching now, attacking millions of Americans because they're Muslims, it's disgusting. And I'm a Christian. I'm not a Muslim. I know there's a lot of effort to claim I'm a secret jihadi. I'm not. You should not attack people on those grounds. And you're seeing it from Republicans. What the hell are you doing? What you're doing is trying to divide the country. And I've lived through 50 years of this crap. All these fake race wars that they're always promoting. Oh, go hate each other while we loot the treasury. That's exactly what's going on. And most people are totally sick of that. So yes, there is a possibility for a huge coalition of decent people once they free their minds from the traps set for them by others and realize, wait a second, we all want to make this country better. And the 15% or 30% who don't, okay. Good luck in Maryland or wherever you wind up. But the rest of us would like to fix it.
Lots of thoughts about this one. Okay, so we're already at an hour. Okay, so Tucker talking about, they want to start race divisions, so we're all arguing with each other, so we're too busy fighting so they can go ahead and raid the treasury. I hear people say stuff like that kind of all the time, like when you talk about right-left dynamics and so on, and they're like, they just want to turn us against each other. And I'm like, no, I have real grievances with the left, like ideological differences that we have to actually debate about and fight about. We can care about the treasury and people spending money and stuff, and I could be fiscal conservative, all that, but But that doesn't mean that we don't have actual real grievances that we need to talk about. Because if you keep allowing your, I don't know, gender ideology and all sorts of other stuff to kind of flourish, or, you know, your pro-abortion stances and your idea that not only should be legal, that but even Christian organizations should be forced to pay for it, that's gonna bump up against me eventually. So we got to have it out. We got to have it out. Now, as far as like, why are you talking about the Muslims? Oh my gosh, that's so evil. Race war. Muslim isn't a race. He didn't say Arab, he said Muslim. That's a religion. It's a religion, it's a political system, it's an ideology. And if you're going around saying like all Muslims are terrorists, that's not right. If you go around saying that it's a religion founded by a pedophile and a warmonger, that's accurate. That it's a very violent book that encourages violence. It's a very violent religion that is very unkind to women and their rights and equal standing in the world. I think that's fair to say that. There's plenty of Muslims who have no idea what's in the book, what's in the hadith. I've seen a lot of videos where people are doing man on the street, or they're doing like different college campus sit down, like random stuff. I'm sitting here setting up stuff with Cam Higby and other folks, and they'll be talking to somebody, and it's a poor little Muslim girl, and she's like, no, those things aren't in the Quran. The Quran is so good. And they're like, and they just start reading off scriptures like, nope, it says this. It says you can beat your wife if you fear disobedience. It says you can kill the infidels. Like, you're not supposed to kill innocent people. Are infidels innocent? Are people who reject the faith innocent? And there's different concepts that teach them to lie and to blend in until they have the power where they can take over. So that's always concerning, just to be frank. It's an ideology. It's an ideology. Did I like all those people going to like Dearborn and like having like a some people seem to be a little nutty out there. Not necessarily, but would I like a bunch of Christians to go and just evangelize? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. But what was the reaction to that? Why? Because there were protests and stuff that happened in Dearborn. What was the reason for that? It was because someone went to a city council meeting, was complaining about a street or something that was being renamed, and I think the person they were renaming it after was a terrorist or something, and the mayor got upset and was like, no, this person is very important to our community, and you're not welcome here. Just don't drive on the street, and when you move out, I'm going to throw a parade. That's what the mayor said. And that got national attention. So there was a reaction to that. And then we just we've had different incidents, including in Dearborn recently, that with foiled terrorist plots. There's supposed to be an attack on Halloween. And one of the people who were like a co-conspirator in it actually participated in October the 7th. It was just chilling here in the United States, wanting to be a mechanic or something like that. We're supposed to just like memory hold it. Like, it just seems like a weird time and thing. And it was weird to just kind of throw out there. It wasn't part of his speech. It just kind of evolved out of the question that he was asked. And I was like, how did he even get here? But, you know, Tucker wanted to buy a house in Qatar. He was just there. And he could do it because he's an American. That was his reasoning. And then he tried to convince Christians, like, actually, it's better in Qatar than it is in Israel for Christians, which I call bullcrap. Like, no, that's not true. I dare Tucker to go there and just tell the truth about Islam and ask people to convert and see how long they let you stay there, Tucker, alive. So I mean, I got questions about the things that he's saying and how he's choosing to conduct himself. But if there's some people who are like, well, Ben's a Jew, he doesn't believe that Jesus is a Messiah, and Tucker says he's a Christian. Oh, okay. Okay, sucker. Okay. You like to be pandered to. I get it. That's why they do it. That's why they do it. Okay, so let me show you an example of Tucker mischaracterizing his opponents. And the best example kind of from last night that I can kind of bring up is this USS Liberty example. So I'm going to go ahead and play a clip because Tucker brought this up twice. He claims that, he was like, oh, he called this kid a Hitlerite when he brought up the USS Liberty. So I'm going to play this clip. And then I'm going to play a clip of Charlie dealing with people asking about the USS Liberty. And then I'm going to play you what Ben said.
To question your motives, actually, why can't you answer the question? Why can't you answer that question? Why do you have to imply that some college kid is like some kind of Hitlerite or something because he's asking about an event? Like, what? By the way, it is okay to ask questions. And I thought that was like the whole reason we were against the left. They're not going to force you to get up there and make ritual denunciations because this isn't my religion, it's politics. By the way, your politics do not trump my love for other people.
By the way, that led to an interesting place where he was like, if my brother went on a drug-addicted murder spree, I still wouldn't denounce my brother. If you wonder how it got into that. But so he did mention it again, but he's complaining about impugning someone's motives, which Tucker does that himself. And now he implied someone was a Hitlerite. Now, Ben, he gives the kid an opportunity to explain why he's asking the question. And Ben's like, there's people who aren't just asking questions. Asking questions is, and Tucker's like, asking questions is fine. You can ask questions. No, but everyone understands that some people aren't innocently asking questions. I had brought up last week, I think it was, when like, oh, we're just asking questions. We're just asking questions. I was complaining about Candace Owens. And I said, okay, how many times do you beat your wife? That's a question. It's also an accusation, right? And so I was trying to explain how Candace Owens isn't just asking questions, et cetera, et cetera. And not too long after that, she went on a rant about Tim Pool and said something about him, likened him to a wife and child beater. And she's like, well, I'm not your wife, Tim. I'm not your children, Tim. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, so she just escalated to that like example. As she attacked Tim Pool, the beef between them is getting really nasty. So anyway, let me show you how Charlie responded to these questions about the USS Liberty, because he did not just, really entertain them. Here we go.
Sure. So I have a question. So from America First perspective, why do we give $3.8 billion to Israel, which is more aid than we've given to Africa, more aid than we've given to South America, and more aid than we've given to the Caribbean combined, which is home to 1 billion poor people, especially when they deliberately attacked the USS Liberty in the 1970s.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event. That is not acceptable. Do not say that.
Okay, Dean Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine. And then the second part is also, you have the Apollo incident, in which they illegally stole
All right,
weapons-grade uranium.
Enough
The
of this-
CIA has reports
enough
on
of
this.
Anti-Zionist,
No, I'm not
anti-Semitic rhetoric.
anti-Israel. I'm just asking from America's perspective because it's not in our interest. They act
Remember
against
the
our
short
interest.
question part?
Sure. I mean, how is it in our interest that we
Easy.
give this money to Israel?
All right, so it's required that they have to buy American weaponry. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, the only place where all three monotheistic religions are allowed to peacefully practice. It's the only country in the Middle East where all three monotheistic religions are represented in their government. It's the only place in the Middle East that has any appreciation for LGBT rights whatsoever. It's the only country in the Middle East that doesn't throw homosexuals off the top of buildings when they find them. It is the only partner that we have in the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. And the subtext of your narrative could be extrapolated to say, well, why on earth would we have a partner like Israel? Guess what? The world's a better place because of Israel.
That's how Charlie handled USS Liberty conspiracy people. Okay. You're peddling conspiracies. I see what you're doing. You're trying to paint this narrative. So good on Charlie there. Now, let me play you how Ben actually responded that night.
You cited during your speech truth as the most important tenet of American conservatism. Why, therefore, did you call irrelevant the Israeli attack in 1967 on the USS Liberty, which left dozens of American servicemen dead and hundreds wounded?
So what I actually said is that if we're looking at modern Israeli-American relations, looking at an attack that happened mistakenly by multiple Navy reports, multiple Israeli reports, and all available evidence, and using that attack in order to undermine today's relations between Israel and America, that's irrelevant. As irrelevant as it would be to cite a piece of evidence from World War II or from 1776 to define America's relations with, for example, Great Britain or Germany today. That does not mean that the attack wasn't horrible for the Americans involved, that it wasn't bloody and terrible. The Israeli government paid reparations to the people who were killed. If you look at the actual military record of what happened on the USS Liberty, it was clearly a mistaken and tragic attack. The people who frequently cite the USS Liberty, however, are not talking about the specifics of the USS Liberty. I suspect that the vast majority of people who bring this up are doing so in order to suggest that Israel deliberately attacked an American ship because Israel deliberately wants to harm America. It is connected generally with a larger point. I wonder if that's your point.
If the truth matters, then the Israeli government must be held accountable for that attack. The American flag was flying on that ship. You do not mistake an American ship for a foreign one when our flag is flying.
So, we can spend the rest of the time talking about the specifics of the U.S. Liberty attack, or you can actually go look at the naval investigations that were done, multiple naval investigations that were done. The reality is that people were flying Mirage planes for the Israeli military at the time. The USS Liberty was sailing in an area where it had essentially gone off-grid. The Israeli military mistook it for an Egyptian ship. They thought it was shelling Al-Arish, which happened not to be true. In the initial attack, the American flag was knocked down, and then the attack went on for about 90 minutes. And then as soon, you can hear this, by the way, on the tapes of the Israeli pilots talking to each other. As soon as they realize that it's an American ship, they call off the attack, they speed a ship to try and help the USS Liberty. There have been multiple unfortunate friendly fire incidents between Allied forces, including, for example, in the Gulf War, where U.S. forces were responsible for killing about 9 British troops during the Gulf War. It's an unfortunate reality of war, but you're not answering my question, which is, what is your broader agenda in asking the question? Because I suspect that your question is not limited to your specific ire over an incident that happened in 1967.
I think we should question any foreign country's relationship with our government.
That's totally fine, but I'm just wondering why you
serve American interests.
Again, I'm perfectly fine with questioning any country's relationship with the United States. But again, I'm wondering what your motivation is in bringing up a 6-decade-old attack as though it is the #1 issue in assessing the relationship between Israel and the United States today.
Well, many problems persist to this day, but it's interesting that you say 6-decade-old incident when there are many people in this audience who were alive for that attack, as if this is something that's irrelevant.
Well, no, it's just not particularly relevant to assessing the relationship between the United States and Israel today, in the same way that in 1967, There are a wide variety of countries with which the United States had different relations. Okay, it's clear you're not going to actually answer the question, so I'm happy to move to this one.
So he didn't call him a Hitlerite. He didn't say, shut up, stop asking questions. He asked him a valid question of, what is your broader agenda here? And if it's if Israel was such a bad partner here, and there's so many issues, because he kind of was like, well, there's other issues, but there's this one from, like you said, 6 decades ago. Different countries changed different relationships with the United States of America. So if you have really good evidence that we shouldn't be partnering with Israel, it seems like you should have a more recent example than this thing that was an accident. Some people don't think it was an accident, and that's why they're bringing it up, because they think it's deliberate or whatever. But he wouldn't own up to his agenda. Did he call him a Hitlerite? No, he gave him the opportunity to explain, and he just kind of sounded like an NPC. So Tucker then decided to get up and defend this young man and, attack Ben for engaging with this young man, telling him the facts of what happened, not saying, shut up, you're a Nazi, shut up, you're an anti-Semite. That's not what Ben did, and that's not what Ben does. It's not what Ben does. Ben has never said, shut up, you're a Nazi. But the reason why Tucker does that kind of stuff and is making those sort of accusations is for the same reason that people say, shut up, you're a Nazi, or shut up, you're a racist, because he's trying to do it ad hominem attack. He's trying to damage their character so he can damage their argument. As far as the Civil War thing, because I haven't really gotten to this, Tucker said it's not real. And Tucker said the Civil War that's happening within the right isn't really real. And what it really boils down to is that it's a control for power over MAGA, or who's going to be the next person, because Trump is obviously going to be president forever. And a lot of people want to stop JD Vance. And he did mention that Ben mentioned that Tucker has a relationship with JD, which he jabbed Tucker's relationship with JD because Tucker keeps making different intelligence jabs at the Trump administration. And I think it was specifically about Epstein or something at the time. I'm not a positive, but he's like, if Tucker wants an answer to a question, he can just reach out to people he does know, the vice president. So that was what was mentioned. I mean, I do find their relationship, I guess, troubling. And I mean, I've been complaining the past couple of days about how I'm kind of tired of the MAGA meanness, I guess, and the, Trump has done a lot of great stuff. I didn't like his Rob Reiner comments, and people who are just trying to double down and defend it. Like I want some, adult kind of business to go on while also acting as an adult outside of just doing the duties of the president and so on. So I just, JD Vance, like when he defended or tried to dismiss the racist group chat thing that came out a couple months ago, and he's like, oh, these are just kids. I'm like, no, they weren't just kids, and I don't appreciate you pretending like that's what it was, because there is a real problem with some racist people in the Republican Party or just the right. And I would rather someone stand up and tell people how they ought to behave and to be better moral agents than just dismissing it like it's not a big deal. And so I thought that was a missed opportunity for JD. And there's like other things too, but I don't like the comfortable proximity to Tucker that I guess that they have. So as far as the war for control in the conservative movement, it's not specifically about JD and him trying to make it about JD is dishonest and a way, I think, to get criticism off of him, and also to impugn the motives of people like Ben and other people who might point out their concern about Tucker. Again, when he did his speech trashing Tucker the whole entire time for Heritage, he brought up specific examples about how Tucker doesn't fit into the conservative side anymore. And you guys can go watch it for yourself and judge for yourself. But I thought Ben laid out a pretty good case. But the idea of like all these conspiracies and not standing up for truth or dignity, moral dignity and stuff is just not how we're supposed to be over on the right. We got to be more than, men shouldn't play women's sports. Like that's really easy to say, especially now. And not everybody was willing to say it before. I was always willing to say that, and that men shouldn't be in the bathroom and so on. And people would push back on me, and I'm like, no, it's not just. It is a safety concern, sure, but it's also about the truth. And that's one of the reasons why I was so gung ho about like, no, you can't come in the bathroom. No, you can't play on the sports teams. Like that's just too bad. Don't lie to your kids and tell them that they can change your gender, because they're going to live very upsetting lives, because they can't just bully everyone into complying. It's not true. I'm not affirming your lie. So, I would get flack from that, even from people on the right, for having such a stickler stance up on it. But now it's easier for people to say that. Megyn Kelly used to be like totally pro LGBT stuff and did a show when she had her stint on NBC or whatever about trans kids and transing the kids and so on. So it's very easy to say that now because the tide has turned, but it wasn't that way a couple of years ago, as I'm sure you guys recall. But there is still things about free markets and fiscal responsibility and strong national defense, peace through strength, and so on and so forth. So making everything about conspiracy and asking the questions that aren't actually questions, and that's not how it should be. And I do think the people are owed more from these podcasters that are supposed to be thought leaders, and we do have just responsibility ourselves. Someone had did a great post just kind of summarizing what Ben said. I'm trying to find it real quick in his speech. Maybe I retweeted it. About his tenets and responsibility, what he laid out. Like besides the fire bombs, like it was an actual great speech about how we should conduct ourselves, how we should behave, what are the solutions. And it's worth listening to. I haven't listened to Knowles' speech, which is interesting that Tucker mentioned him when he brought up how our founding was like rooted in the Bible, but when he tried to talk about free speech and stuff. But Michael Knowles believes in cancel culture. He believes in obscenity laws and things like that. And his thing is, we were not just meant to say all kinds of crazy things and do all kinds of crazy things and be like, free speech, I have the freedom of expression to run around naked or say all this crazy stuff. That's never been what Michael has stood for. As a matter of fact, at AmFest, he was like, no, I've always been for cancel culture. So just kind of puzzling to bring up Michael Knowles, but I'll have to go back and listen to the speech. I do enjoy Michael Knowles. I know I liked it. Maybe I bookmarked it. Maybe I didn't. Okay, I can't find the post that I'm talking about. But it was a good overall speech. I just recommend that you guys check it out. And again, it's not just firebombs, but I, as far as something forward thinking to and instructions on like how to live a better life or have a better conservative movement and so on, I don't think Tucker really did that. People ask him questions about like, how do you get closer to God or what do you do? And he's like, oh, I read the Bible, I do this, and et cetera, et cetera. But maybe he does. I just don't see the fruits of the spirit in Tucker as he keeps mischaracterizing people and lying. And he's very quick to say, you know, he's not perfect and he's not an expert and people shouldn't look to him or whatever. But he's like trying to just make himself seem really relatable and kind of doing the self-deprecation thing to make people comfortable, and then he comes in and just attacks people who he disagrees with using the Bible, and and not very well. Not very well. So anyway, I guess that's kind of all that I might have to say with you here on today. Off the top of my head, like I said, Candace didn't like Ben's speech, and Megyn Kelly didn't like it. She'll have time to respond, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm not too fond of Megyn Kelly right now. I'm not. I thought her speech was insane. I mean, her interview with Ben was insane, and then she said that he lied when she's like, Candace didn't say things about Erica. She's defended her. I'm like, no, she's definitely implicated her in Turning Point and Seth Dillon, which apparently Megyn doesn't care about because he also said Seth Dillon, and people don't care that she attacked other people and implicated them in murder. So it's not like I can appreciate people wanting to be particularly protective of Erica, but she's not the only person who's been harmed. And doing all of it is immoral. All of it's immoral. And I do want to remind people that Tucker fired shots at Ben in 2023 after Israel was attacked. Ben, of course, was talking about the Hamas attack a lot, was obviously very emotional about it. And Tucker was saying like that he didn't really love America because he's so concerned about what was going on in Israel while people were dying of fentanyl, or seemed to care about that more than he cared about people dying of fentanyl, which is a wild sort of metric and way to attack Ben. But he started it. And then Ben tried to reach out to him to have a conversation and talk about it. And Tucker didn't want to do that. He didn't want to debate. He wanted to sit down. He was dodging his calls and all kinds of different stuff. So Ben said, again, all this stuff wasn't personal, but looking at Tucker's actions, he doesn't seem like someone who is helping the conservative movement anymore. That I do think that he's doing a lot of harm. You guys can go read his newsletters. They're wild. You know, he has on a lot of terrible folks on his podcast that he doesn't really push back against, and is platforming some pretty obscure folks, revisionist history, and attacking evangelicals while really standing up for Muslims and mocking people who are concerned about Sharia law, standing up for Zohran Mamdani. And I question why he's doing all these things. And I don't know his motives at the end of the day. Like, I don't know his end game. I can just see what he's doing. And I do think they're destructive. I do think there's a war within the conservative movement. And I think that someone like Ben Shapiro should win. I'm on that side. I think the values and stuff that he's still trying to uphold, I agree with. And I'm concerned about Tucker and other folks and the grifting. And I agree with Ben, and I have been saying for a while that like his speech at Heritage was just like, we need borders around our country, we need borders around conservatism. Like, you have to conserve conservatism if you want conservatism to win the day. And I have been saying you need to gatekeep certain things. So what he was saying really hit home for me. If I was going to write a speech for Ben, it probably would have been maybe the language, but it would have been toned down a bit. But like the sentiments would have been similar. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Please go blacktnews.com. Check out different content on the website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the site, because it does cost to stream, run my site, all that good stuff. So you guys can support it. Very much appreciate it, and appreciate you guys. You guys can check out my different books that are available, like Super Kid, and that's my middle grade, like chapter. It's not really, yeah, middle grade chapter book about a boy with overactive imagination who believes he has superpowers. He doesn't really, but he teams up with his friends to do good around the community. And I got something for older readers, like The Color of God's Eyes, and the sequel is A Song on the Devil's Lips. And the third book is called A Woman's Nature, and I'm really excited about that one. And they're just gonna get better and better and better. And anyway, those two are out. It is on Kindle Unlimited, but you guys can order paperbacks and stuff. Those, I don't have any stock of that right now, so you'd have to actually go on Amazon and get those. But you can find out the information at ninjadustpublishing.com, which there's a link in the description. I'll take you there, and you guys can find that through blacktnews.com. God bless you guys. I will not be streaming on Monday, and I will let you know in advance. Christmas is on Wednesday, right? Or is it on Thursday? It's on Thursday. So yeah. I might take the week. I'll let you know next week what I'm gonna plan to do, but Monday for sure I will not be streaming. So God bless you guys, and I will see you next time.